And Tom, would you lead the pledge?
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I apologize. We had your granddaughter lead us. I didn't think until we got going, so I'm sorry. Clifton will be here, but he's running late. Our special guest is expected to be here at approximately 6:45. So let's go to public comments. Are there any public comments? Hearing none, we will proceed from there. Maybe we can get some of this done before, some of these things out of the way before. I think the minutes will hold up until Clifton is here. Treasurer's report, we should wait for that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump around here and see if we can pick off a couple. Town clerk.
Vacation.
Planning board. Agricultural commission. Cable commission. Cemetery trustees. You want to give a brief rundown on the event that's happening Sunday?
I can, that's me.
That's you. I know that would be under
Heritage.
Okay. Code enforcement officer, road agent is not here. Conservation commission, I'm here, nothing to report. Emergency management director is not here. Forest fire warden, I'm not here. School district, not here. We're going to have a quick meeting tonight. Heritage commission.
Hi there. So this Sunday, the Heritage Commission is having a reception. There will be I don't know what to call it, like a service honoring Colonel James Hackett, who was one of our founding fathers of the town, and was actually the gentleman responsible for building the ship, I don't remember what it was called, that's on the seal of the state of New Hampshire, along with other stuff. Was involved in the American Revolution and before. There will be a play that they have placed his gravestone, and this will be a ceremony just honoring him. We will come, Craig has asked that no one go in on Governor's Road from that side, but we would like to meet here at the townhouse and the town offices at 1:30, and we'll take cars down through Cottle Hill. We will then come back, after the service at the graveside, we will come back to the townhouse, and the Heritage Commission will be doing a reception.
Wonderful. Well, hopefully we'll get a good turnout. I enjoyed reading that little handout on it.
Yeah.
I think the website says 2 o'clock here.
So, can someone change it to 1:30 here?
Yep.
Meet here at 1:30 to go to the site?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. And planning board?
Craig is here.
Yeah, okay.
That's
We'll
okay.
be with you in
Sure.
about 2 minutes, Chris.
Sure.
I'm early.
No, we're going to get you earlier. We won't get home. Nothing from the planning board, and some of the others we'll pick off when they come. Craig, we will have you, if you don't mind, introduce yourself to, we don't have a big audience, but we have you on camera, so you're all
I'm
set.
Craig Nichols. I don't believe I've met.
I'm Rich Zacher.
Yeah.
Craig Nichols, nice to meet you. Good to meet you. You're monitored from the Department of Revenue because my card, cell phone's on it.
Hi, Bill Nelson.
Bill, nice.
Thanks, Craig.
Hi.
I believe you invited me here to discuss the equalization ratio.
That is correct.
Choose glasses.
And if you want to come up front and face, we have a bigger audience that watches us on
You want me to do that?
online.
That's perfectly fine.
chairs, you want to stand, whatever you want. Do you need paper?
Where would you like me to be?
Have it over here.
All right.
Grab a chair.
That's right.
Okay.
Each year, the Department of Revenue asks that the towns, each town, provide sales that have occurred from October 1st of 2000, in this particular case, 2010 through September 30th, 2011. That basically brackets April 1st, which is your first day of your new tax year. So it's 6 months on either side. They try to gather the sales. They compare the sales against the assessments to see where the assessments lie. It's called the equalization ratio. We okay so far?
So far?
Okay.
Yeah, give the dates again, it was last,
It's, what they try to do is in this particular, each town provides all the sales information, well, they get the sales information, we gather that. And then they provide all the assessments for those properties from October 1st, in this particular case, October 1st, 2010, through September 30th, 2011. And that makes April 1st fall right in the middle, which is your first day of your new tax year. Okay?
Okay.
And then what we try to do from there is we get information together so that we can create what they call the median ratio, the coefficient of dispersion, and the price-related differential. I'll go over those in a minute. We need a good sample, though. Last year, there was a total of 16 sales that occurred, and only 6 were considered valid or arm's-length transactions. That's not enough to create a good sample to see where the assessments lie.
What would be invalid?
Invalid would be a divorce situation, a foreclosed property, even properties that are in current use, because of the fact that the assessments in a lot of cases will not reflect market value because of the current use reduction.
Okay.
So what the department then does is go back. They go back until they can get sufficient sales. They had to go back until October 1st of 2007 and analyze sales from October 1st, 2000, excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong one. I brought last year's too. I apologize about that. You had 15 sales last year, 7 were qualified. So they went back to October 1st of 2008 and analyzed sales from October 1st of 2008 through September 30th, 2011. And with that, we had 17 valid sales, which is still not a great sampling, but it's good.
what percentage are you looking for? I mean, I think there's only something like 300 homes in town.
Well, with the economic times the way they are, this is happening in most of the towns, most of the smaller communities. You typically would like to have around 20 or greater sales that occurred, and during good economic times, you will see that many. Sometimes we'll have to go back 6 months, not 3 years. In this particular case, we had to go back 3 years. But with that, the ratio, the median ratio.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you.
Sure.
How do you, if the housing market is starting to fall, and it starts in 2008, and it's working its way down, let's say it's at its lowest now. Is that all figured out that the one in 2008, if it was sold today, would be worth less, or?
Well, yes, they trend it. They do time trend it. They do track sales information to try to create a time trending. You actually updated your values for your assessments in 2010 and brought everything back in line with market value at that point. So then they had to also do trending for that too, to try to bring everything in line for April 1st of 2011. So as of 2011, 90% of all property in your town, the median ratio is 99.7%, or the assessments are basically right at market value, 90% of your properties. Coefficient of dispersion, which is the COD, is basically the, just drew a blank, excuse me. It's the measurement of deviation from the median ratio. So in this particular case, it's 8.6%. So they're saying that 90% of all your properties fall either 8% below that median ratio of 99% or above that median ratio. So from your most underassessed to your most overassessed, there's only a 16% spread. The ASB, which is the Assessing Standards Board, says that anything for a rural community, anything under 20 is acceptable. So you're fine.
I guess I got another question.
Sure, not a problem, that's what I'm here for.
So, I think I heard you say that we're effectively at 100%,
Right,
because you had to go back into time to look at the data.
right.
Now you go to another town
Mhm.
that might have a lot of activity. So their data is going to be much more accurate, if you will, because they're having activity.
Mhm.
And with the market going down the way it is, I would assume that towns that have a lot of activity would reflect the downward trend in assessed value.
Not necessarily. It depends on when they did their last update. Every 5 years, every town in the state's required to do values anew, or update values. So most towns are pretty close to their revaluation happened within the last few years. So and with the way the market's going, the market's starting to stabilize. Hopefully, that's what it appears to be anyway. We're just not seeing the sales activity. That's the biggest problem right now. The banks just don't want to lend the money in a lot of cases. But the weighted mean is the way to compare Brookfield to Wakefield to the other communities, things like that. We calculate that too, and that equates to your weighted mean is 102.6%, which means that the assessments are roughly 2.5% above market value, or above your median ratio. I'm not a statistician to tell you exactly what all of this means, except that the weighted mean is used to for your state education portion of your tax rate, and also for your county portion. They use the weighted mean to analyze how much portion of Brookfield would pay for. Is this Carroll County?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I apologize. So Carroll County's portion is created through the weighted mean on Brookfield, for Brookfield. And that's what they do for every other community. So if you want to compare Brookfield assessments to Wakefield or Wolfboro or any other communities, you look at the weighted mean. If you want to look at just what's happening in Brookfield itself, you use the median ratio. It's a better reflection. If you just used the sales that occurred last year from October 1, 2010 through September 30th, 2011, which was only 7 valid sales, which is a very small sample, it still comes out at 99.7% for your median ratio. So it works out whether it's 3 years old or whether it's just those 7 sales. It works out to be exactly the same. They're still right on, which tells me that when they did their revaluation in 2010, a year later is a really good example of what's happening, how that model's really working. The model's working because your COD, the coefficient of dispersion, for them is actually 13.8.
So what I'm getting from this is you're telling me, or at least I'm hearing, that since our assessment in town, our property values effectively haven't changed with respect to assessed value.
Well, when they did the revaluation last year, the assessments were slightly high. In other words, they were 101.2%.
Okay.
So they've come down roughly 2%.
So you're going to tell the people in the town that between 2010,
In 2011,
our assessed values haven't changed. In other words,
your assessments values won't change until
no,
your
I
next
said it wrong. I
update.
said it wrong. The fair market value of our properties haven't changed since they were recently assessed.
Not dramatically, roughly 2%.
Not dramatically.
Right. Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what the statistics all show.
I understand you correctly.
I'm just a messenger. But, you can list a property at whatever you want. You can put it on for whatever you want. It's what somebody's willing to buy. What's willing to pay for it is what realistically. I know I was trying to sell my house during the really bad times. It took me 4 years. I came down 30% before I finally sold it. But that was a sign of the times. Now, things have started to stabilize, and this is a reflection of that also.
Okay.
That it was at roughly down 2% versus 10 or 15%, 2007 to 2008, 2008 to 2009. we were dropping quite fast.
Now, does this affect any categories of, an example, I don't know how many of those are waterfront properties, but I could think 5, 6 years ago, they had no sales because we had no properties that were sold waterfront that they could use as comparison. It was a big hullabaloo of the town over that whole issue because we picked other lakes and all this. Anyway,
Right. Yeah, there was only 2 valid sales for water.
so they had 2 valid sales. So, oh, I guess it would make a difference. Okay.
Yeah, and with 2 valid sales, we could not create any kind of ratio. We need at least 7 or 8 before we can do anything. So we did, because what we do is if you look at you get all this information from the department.
Yes.
If you look at this one page, it will break down, it won't show up for there. But if you look at this, it will break down single-family properties, multifamily properties, residential land, waterfront. If you had condominiums, it would have condos in there too. In this particular case, of the 17 valid sales, 13 were single-family homes. 1 was a 2 to 4 family home. There again, no ratio was created because of that. There was only 3 residential land sales, so that wasn't sufficient to create a ratio either. And waterfront, there was 2. So that's where your 17 come into play. More than 17, let me see. Okay, the residential land would come out. There's not a lot of sales information to really, it would be really ideal if you had 20 valid sales in the last year to see exactly where everything lies. But with time trending and everything else, it gives you a really good reflection because the statistics that they use, it's a computer model. I don't even know how it works exactly. I know that you compare it. You try to find 2 houses of almost identical that have sold in a year's time just to see, where the transfer, what the price differences are, or if you can get a sale resale, then you can really get a good indication of what's happening with the market.
Any questions from anybody? Jump in. Okay.
Okay, and your price-related differential, PRD, is at 1. The Assessing Standards Board says anywhere from 0.98 to 103 is acceptable. Basically, that is a measure of the equity between your lower-end homes to your higher-end homes. In this particular case, it's right on again, which tells me the model's working. Your assessment model's working.
So you're saying how lower-end homes are assessed versus how higher-end they come out
Right,
pretty
exactly.
accurately.
Yeah, if it were below 1, the higher-end homes would be carrying more of the tax burden. If it were above 1, the lower-end homes would be carrying more of the tax burden. In this particular case, it's right at 1, so everything's equitable.
Okay.
No, it looks really good. It really, truly does. I don't know what else to tell you on that.
Oh, I have a question.
Sure.
So this whole discussion is to figure out what percent or what share of the county tax in the state tax that Brookfield pays.
That's the weighted mean.
With respect to other communities.
Yes, that's the weighted mean portion.
So you just told us that we stayed effectively flat, 100%, 101 to 99 or 98.
That was your median ratio. The
102.6.
right, the 102.6 was your weighted mean for this year versus last year 99.3 for your weighted mean. So it's roughly 3%.
What other towns do in the county, do you know?
Off the top of my head, I do not.
Because, help me understand, if their assessed value went down, we pick up a bigger share.
If it would be, how does it work? If the assessed values went down, the weighted mean would increase. In other words, because your assessed values are basically your assessed values stay the same. If the weighted mean changes, that means your values have dropped, and your assessed values are higher than your market value now. In other words, they're saying that in Brookfield, the weighted mean.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay.
Now I'm comparing towns.
Yeah.
So if we stayed effectively flat at 100%, and another town, XYZ, their weighted average went down because they had a lot of sales and they reflect, whatever, a shift of taxes comes to Brookfield.
Possibly.
Possibly, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not sure exactly. I've never even really looked at how the county taxes are
Then the state
calculated.
tax, then the state
Yeah.
tax, whatever tax you're familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar with taxes, to be honest with you, I'm familiar with assessments. okay, and how assessments work and how the relationship between assessments and the ratio is.
Yeah, that, I understand that, I understand what you said, but then, for our discussion tonight, we're talking about what share of the county tax Brookfield's gonna pay with respect to our neighbors.
I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, I never looked at it in the 25 years that I've been doing assessment work.
Okay.
But
Well, we saw from the school, I was reading.
Carroll County's taxes went up, didn't they? Didn't they go up last year?
Oh,
Or
man.
was, or no, Sullivan County.
They were
excuse me.
effectively
Flat,
flat.
yeah.
No, that's next year.
Next year.
Next year is retirement home.
We've been promised, lucky us.
I apologize for my ignorance on that. I just really have not looked at it, and I wasn't prepared. Jessica just asked me to come. I didn't know why.
Well, this is on the equalizations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's fine.
Because what I understood when I was reading in the literature, it's really a shift of, you look at all the property value in the county, for example, and every town's got to pay their fair share. Makes sense. So if one town doesn't shift and other towns either go up or down, the tax burden will shift between the towns.
Right.
And that affects our,
And it also works into the school budget,
Yes, it
because
does.
part of that is rolled into that.
yes, and it works into the state property, the state education. So it's important to know how we fared with respect to our,
Now, I also oversee Wakefield and Ossipee.
okay?
Those assessments stayed basically very similar to what's happened with Brookfield.
Okay.
So,
That's important data.
yes, yeah. As far as, you know, they declined slightly, but they're pretty much basically the same as what they were a year ago. I do not know what happened in Wolfboro. Tamworth, same way. That's another one of my towns.
How far were we, Diana, at one point, was it 70%? I mean, the value was assessed at, we were at way off before we went to the,
Before the 100%.
yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
before,
for a couple of years, we were really skewed.
right. It won't
But I think
happen.
most towns were at that point too.
They were not enforcing the 5-year
That's right.
revaluations,
Yeah, yeah.
which they are now enforcing in half for the last 10 years. And so you should not see this big swing anymore.
It should be kept
The
stable.
swing will come from what is spent. Like the school, looking at the school one, they're going up, I think,
But what will
last year,
happen-
54 cents.
Okay, we have a piece of property that just sold on Kingswood Lake. And we probably don't even have the information on it
That would
yet.
be next year's.
That they really sold quite a ways under the assessed value that we have on it.
Mhm.
It was
Was it a distress situation?
not, I don't know, how do you define a distressed situation?
Sometimes, I mean, it was a situation where if it were a second home, they just could not afford to keep it any longer.
Pretty much, yes.
And so
It was,
therefore, they were willing to take below what market value was for that, and that would be classified as an invalid sale
Yes,
because of
and
that.
it definitely was sold
Mhm.
under, I mean, yes, she was.
Yeah.
She's the lady that owned it, just had to
Right.
sell it.
Mhm. And that, and that,
She's in Florida taking care of her mother, she couldn't afford the mortgage payment on it. So I guess you could classify that as distressed.
right, and so
She
therefore,
surely thought it was distressed, I'll tell you that.
then it would be that would be an invalid sale, would not be put into the equalization ratio.
Yeah, well, Jessica and I were talking about that the other day, it's like, whoa, what's that gonna do for
Yeah, that
all
won't
of
do it.
our values on the lake if it was sold for?
Yeah, it's an outlier, and it would not be taken into
And
consideration.
I'm not even exactly sure how much she sold it for, I don't think anything's come down yet. has it?
Nothing yet.
Mhm.
Well, it just happened.
Yep.
And,
Mhm.
so I don't know what the difference is between what she sold it for and what her assessed value is on it.
Mhm.
I just know she said she sold it for way under, more to meet a mortgage obligation.
So, yeah, so she had to come to the table with money, unfortunately.
I don't
And
know
that-
if I think she probably broke even on
Mhm.
it, but I don't think she made much on
Mhm. Yeah. No, and that unfortunately during economic times like we're experiencing right now, that happens more
it.
often
Yeah,
than you
well, and
think.
people also refinance Whereas theoretically, they've owned the house long enough so they shouldn't have much of a mortgage if they hadn't fiddled with it,
Right.
basically.
Mhm.
They hadn't
You see,
changed it.
right, you see these mortgage companies will give you 100%, 110% mortgage, things like this. That's what they were advertising several years ago, and that's why we're in the situation we're in now.
That's right.
But it appears to me that lakefront has definitely stayed very close to similar values as the year before. And single families don't, I mean, there hasn't really been sufficient sales to really see what's happening, but there's just so many properties on the market. That's what also happens. I know I live in Alton. There's 184 single-family homes on the market right now in Alton. People, after a while, just get tired of having their house looked at, and they finally just say, heck, we're going to sell it. And they'll take whatever at that point. And that's what drives values down, too. It's just an over-glutton of properties on the market. So, I don't know what else to tell you.
Is it, are you in a position to, and I read it somewhere, I don't remember where, how we figure out what we spend, what it costs us to spend an extra $100,000? Do you have that formula? I know there's a formula.
That's through the municipal, the municipal side of the
Okay.
Department of Revenue. That's where, do you have Michelle or Tim? Who do you have? Set your tax rate.
Oh, no, I met them.
Jeannie Sims said.
Yeah,
Jeannie
Jeannie does,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. That.
I was thinking Town,
Mhm.
the magazine, the Town and Country, whatever it is that we get,
Yeah.
that had an article in there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's from the
Just
LPC.
recently, yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, but those questions you could just email Jeannie on, and she could answer on those.
Yeah.
and I think it's really interesting, because does this happen, probably not just New Hampshire, is where, we set a budget, we start the year and don't vote for it in March, and so we've gone 3 months or 2.5 months into it
Mhm.
before we actually decide the budget we want.
Yeah, I don't know, well, all I know is that in most states, it's assessed by the county and not by the town. And so therefore, you have a larger sampling too, for when you're creating your reappraisal model.
Oh, is it, okay.
And things like that, so, and you can also get better statistics too, because you have a larger sampling. When you're only dealing with small communities versus, Carroll County. I mean, if you were assessing Carroll County itself, then we'd have several hundred sales. At that point, we'd have a better handle on exactly what the ratios are.
Well, any other questions? We appreciate your coming all the way from
Thank you,
Alton.
and I apologize I couldn't answer your
That's all right.
question there, but I will.
Fair enough.
Oh, you have the number though, so you can
No, I will,
fire away emails.
and I will get some information and get back to Jessica too.
Oh,
on
great.
Exactly how that works.
Appreciate it, thank you.
We appreciate your coming and explaining that, how this all works in this, especially in this economic time with so many houses on and being sold, and it's surprising we're that right in the mark. It's
Yeah,
nice to
and
know.
it's good to see that, it's really a good indication, like I said, each year after the revaluation, see, in the year of revaluation, you're taking those sales to create your model to reappraise every property in the town. Your ratios come from those sales that were used. That should be close to 100% with a good COD and a good PRD. It's the year later when the sales haven't, other than just looked at, but they're not changing the assessments. That's when you can see whether the model's truly working. Year, 2 years out, 3 years out, to see if the model's truly working. It shows me that 1 year out, the model that they created to reappraise the town appears to be working.
And then there's a trigger amount, right? At one point when you get to a certain thing where you have to then do the whole 10.
Well, in 2015, you're going to have to reappraise again.
But isn't there a time before then that it could be done if we're way off?
If the way they look at it is all these various strata, in other words, you have your single-family property, your single-family homes, your raw land, your waterfront, they're all a strata. If the median ratio becomes greater than 5% from the overall median ratio, then we start watching it. So if one of those strata, such as raw land, all of a sudden really declines or really appreciates, and it's now 7 or 8 or 10% higher than the median ratio, we might suggest that you then adjust the raw land to bring it in line with the rest of the community.
Mhm.
or if the coefficient of dispersion gets greater than 20. Right now, like I said, it was, wrong glasses on 8%, I think that's what it says, I'm sorry, wrong glasses on that. But, you know, right now,